Step one complete, didn't fall, so great start. Well, thank you everyone and thanks for coming this early in the morning on Saturday. So my presentation is on improving functional mobility and ADLs in the Spastic cerebral palsy. It's a 4-week time trial Exopulse polysuit. So who here knows what Exopulse polysuit is? Okay, so a fair few of you, great. But for reference, it's a full body neurostimulation garment designed to reduce spasticity pain in improved function. Improved function in the upper motor neuron legion group. Now how it works, it utilizes 58 embedded electrodes to stimulate muscles and promotes a theory called reciprocal inhibition, where we stimulate the opposing muscle to the affected muscle group and produce muscle spasticity. There has been some recent clinical studies in 2023 which have shown some sustained improvement and mobility after a 60-minute session. So, the case study. The case study is a 44-year-old female with spastic diplegic CP. For today's presentation, we'll call her Jane. She works in the health department, uses a 4-wheel walker, has a long history of AFO use, significant limited ambulation in the home and the community. And I want you to hold on to this as one of her goals was very simple and was make a cup of tea and carry it independently. So, for objective data, she had reduced range of motion in her knee extensors, knee flexors, hip flexion, and patellocrural dorsiflexors. And she presented with significant clonus and tone in knee flexors, knee extensors, plantar flexors, as well as hip flexion as well. So I know orthotists love game videos, so I've got some baseline videos of her walking. I'm not very good at taking videos, but you can see in the mirror, Jane turning around. So I want to run through this quickly. This is just modified Tardieu scale. So the modified Tardieu scale is a good measure for spasticity, and I've highlighted in green the knee extensors. This is a rare case where we see both tone in the knee flexors and the knee extensors, so picking which muscle to target was quite difficult. I opted to pick to target the knee extensors, ideally to give her more voluntary control of her knee. And we can see that she was able to go from a grade 3 to a grade 1, which was quite substantial improvement. I completed some functional outcome measures, the timed up and go on a 10-metre walk test, and across all time points we saw a gradual improvement across the time points measured, which is fantastic. In hindsight, I wish I did a 2-minute walk test rather than a 10-metre walk test. Found for her, walking distance would be more impactful than walking speed, but hindsight's a good thing. Now, what I've done differently, and through my personal experience wearing the suit, I found it hard to quantify the feelings that the suit created. So when I wore it for myself, functionally didn't notice too much of a difference, but subjectively a big difference in how I felt. So I wanted to measure this. So we used a series of subjective-based outcome measures, and I wanted to measure the impacts on ADLs. And through the 4-week trial, we managed to see a greater ease in Jane's completion of ADLs, including self-care tasks. She was also able to navigate new environments. So being a significantly limited community ambulator, post-Molli suit trial, she was able to ambulate in a wider variety of environments, and I'll show you guys later. And also maintaining an exercise routine. Darren had a great presentation yesterday about upper motor neuron legion group and weakness as they age. So maintaining an exercise routine is really important. And then for what I did differently, improving health-related quality of life. I found how do we demonstrate an improvement in quality of life in the Molli suit rather than just focusing on functional improvement. So this is my quality of life measure. The EQ5D5L is actually a widely used health-related quality of life outcome. It has a large data set across the world, so we can actually measure the data that we collect with normative groups in Australia and across the world in a vast variety of populations. So it uses 5 dimensions and has 5 severity levels. It gives you a utility score, where negative 0.81 being a very poor perceived quality of life, and 1 being a very high in quality of life. So pre-trial, we can see this individual scored 0.65 pre-trial, so quite substantially poor perceived health quality of life. At the end of the 4-week trial, she actually increased it to a 0.862, which is in line with the normative Australian data for a female in her age group. So she's not only improved dramatically, but she's able to improve her quality of life to the levels of the normative population in Australia. And then we can compare that to some normative scores in CP. So 0.4 is a normative EQ5D score in the US and the UK, so she's gone above that, which is fantastic. But what does this all mean? It's all well and good for a nerd like me to look at all this data, but for the client, what does it mean? It means that she can do things like this. So the picture on I think it's my right, your left, is immediately after a 1 hour in-clinic trial. Single leg balance, yes, supported by the rails, but able to actually bend her knee, full range of motion, and hold her leg like that. And then on the right, we see this was 2 weeks into a home trial, and for the first time in about 30 years, she was able to independently ascend and descend stairs. Now, data is great, but actually watching that is a lot more impactful than any numbers that you can represent. I don't know if you can see, but you can see a massive smile on her face as well. But I want you to think back to her main goal, making a cup of tea. That was the biggest thing for this individual. And at the end of the 4-week trial, So, to me as an individual with CP and also as a clinician, I think sometimes when I first started, I got lost in the biomechanical reasonings behind things. We're taught to focus on the kinematics and the biomechanics, but from my personal experience, I think we look past the overall effect that has on an individual. So yes, albeit we look at her biomechanics, she likely needs some form of orthotic support, but being able to achieve her goal, in my mind, is more important than the biomechanics behind how she's doing it. And obviously you can see her smile at the end. 10 out of 10 smile there. So these next 2 videos are just Jane in physio, and for the first time ever really being able to do some sort of a run, quite fun, but working really hard in physio during that 4-week trial to get to this point. Pretty impactful stuff. I think personally more impactful than any numbers that I've presented today. But what does this all mean really? Molli helps improve individuals' functional capacity. Unlike typical orthotic management that just compensates for muscle imbalances and muscle weaknesses, Molli has given this individual an ability to improve her capacity. We were able to demonstrate a measurable physical improvement. So through the functional outcome measures, we're able to see range of motion improvement, tardive improvement. But the follow-on effect of that is how did that influence her ADL impact? And we were able to see that through the survey-based outcome measures, that the Molli actually improved her physical function, which then in turn improved her ADL impact and her ability to improve ADLs, which then also in turn improves her health-related quality of life. I think Marilyn Ramstead on Thursday was talking about quality of life and perceived quality of life of individuals with disability, and it's something that I think we don't look at clinically enough. And finally, with the shifts in the NDIS funding model going from removal of reasonable and necessary to more function-based focus, I think showing a cause and effect between functional improvement and completion of ADLs will only become more important in the future. And finally, this is a single point case study. I have a few more studies going on at the moment, but didn't manage to get that data done in time. So my last closing thing is, as an individual with CP and as an orthotist, I think look at the grander picture, give the individual an opportunity to expand on their functional capacity, allow them to try new things. I know sometimes when I was growing up, the goals were just to stay on your feet. The goals weren't to do, stand here in front of you and to go to university. So as an individual, I've worked hard to do that, and it's taken a lot of work, and I have to thank my team as well, Barry and Andrew, for knowing me for the last 20 years. But look at it as an orthotic group, we need to be better at looking at quality of life as a whole and going forward. Thank you.
Are there any questions? We're going to take the questions at the end of each presentation, so I'd love to throw it open to the floor. Claire's got a microphone that she's going to float around with if you don't just want to stand up and yell. Darren, right at the back, mate.
Hey, thanks. Great presentation, mate. As a user, can you give the audience a sense of what it's like to wear solid ankle designs versus the newer controlled ankle designs?
It's hard to say. So, as a user, having controlled range of motion at the ankle is very nice. It's nice to wear, but it comes at a cost, in a sense. Controlled ankle designs mean that I'm more reliant on my more proximal muscle strength to maintain that range of motion. It also meant that I had to do a lot more work in physio and exercise to maintain mobility. Where fixed ankle designs, they're very stable. So for stability, static stability, excellent, fantastic. It's sort of finding a balance between that is quite hard as a user. So.
Just wondering how often and how long your case study was wearing the Molli suit for?
1 hour every second day. So it's the simplest form of therapy. You put it on, lie in bed for an hour, take it off. Yeah.
Hey Max, I was wondering how you determined or adjusted the programming for the Molli suit as it went?
Yep. So this is why we did after we did a 1 hour, we checked the Tartu scores, we did spasticity management again after an hour to see if there was an improvement, and we also checked again at 2 weeks. It also comes back to patient feedback. So an individual feels like they're not getting as much effect in a specific muscle group, I'll then, at the review, turn up the program in that targeted group. If we're not seeing improvement in tone that we expect, then I would go back in the program and change it. So for that individual, we actually increased the stimulation in a dorsiflexors to reduce that gastroc tone a little bit more at the halfway point. And the next 2 weeks after that really worked out well for it.
Can I ask you a selfish question?
Yeah.
Max, for those that don't know, what's the difference between doing a Tartu scale assessment and something like a modified strength scale?
Tartu scale uses 3 velocities. So you got V1, V2, V3. So in that graph it was all V3, which is fast jerky movements. They're typically the ones that display the tone most. Any quick jerky movements will likely display some form of clonus that tone more than a V1, V2 score. I do have data for V1 to V2 scores, but it doesn't really show much. So using the Tartu at V3 was more impactful than modified Ashworth, in my opinion, because you have the ability to look at each time point, or each speed, sorry.
Time for one more question. We've got one down here, another one in the middle. You guys are I'll go with Rachel, and then...
Hi Max, thank you for that. Obviously we're in the same team, so I've seen you kind of going through this process, and I just thought it would be really worthwhile for yourself to kind of explain how you felt once you wore the Molli suit and what that experience was like for you.
It's not a very politically correct answer, but I put it down, it's a very euphoric feeling. It's hard to quantify. Selfishly, it's hard to quantify the feelings of reduction in tone has anybody, because as an individual, you never experience it. I've never experienced what tone doesn't feel like. I'm only known this one thing. So when it starts to turn off, your mind doesn't know how to comprehend it. So the way I would describe it to my colleagues at the time was, it felt like I was high. So that's really the best way I can describe it. It's extremely euphoric, and a lot of the individuals, when they have a good effect, they won't know how to describe either, which is why I went down that subjective outcome measure path. Jane, for example, wouldn't sit down, just kept going up and down, running around, and it got to the point where I was like, you need to sit down because you're freaking me out. Like, if you fall over after your paperwork, and the bosses aren't going to be happy at me. So, yeah, so it really is quite euphoric in a sense.
Thank you.